news. But let's move on to the political week that Boris Johnson has had. Has it been a great week? Well, many people look at the end of COP26 saying it wasn't quite the triumph he'd hoped for when it came to that. Obviously, he's had to deal with the whole fallout from so-called sleaze. The stories didn't go away this week, did they, in that large regard? And then there are, frankly, some Conservative MPs who aren't terribly happy with what's been announced today. What do we make of it all? Is it a significant blip or not? Well, delighted to say that we're joined by journalist Georgia Gilholy. Apologise, Georgia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do you make of the Prime Minister's week? I've just listed out a litany there of things that may not have reflected too badly, not too well on him. What's your judgments on this?
Yeah, so I think that obviously with these kinds of things, the long-term impact is hard to tell. And I think that one of the sort of factors at play as to whether this will, affect the next general election, for example, is if Labour are able to provide a credible alternative vision for the country when it comes to, I guess, the sleaze issues, also the economy. And I think over the weekend we did see a bit of a dip in 3 polls for the Tories, sort of on the back of that. And of course, that was before sort of the events of this week. We've seen a lot of backlash against the Integrated Rail Plan launch today, which obviously has scrapped a big part of the HS2 plan. And I think that one of the things that comes into my head when I think about, let's say, the arguments over the Northern Powerhouse is realistically whether they spend more on HS2 or less, or they scrap this or that part of it. One of the main things just sticking in my head is, in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, which technically is still going on, we still have certain restrictions. The government could actually bring in more restrictions again, which was obviously include a big impact on business as it has previously. One of the things in my head is, we have soaring energy costs. Yesterday, the ONS obviously announced the Consumer Price Index had more than doubled the Bank of England's target. So the main thing in my head, it's not necessarily the day-to-day sort of issues that go on, not suggesting they're not important, of course, and the government has definitely made mistakes, I think, in the past 2 weeks, as we all know. But I'm just thinking, at the next election, people are going to vote probably with what they think is better for their pockets, or, what they think the current government has done wrong, for their income. So.
And in many regards, though, it's quite difficult to work out when you're in the moment whether this is a significant moment. Maybe not necessarily for the electorate or for voters out there, but there is a sense that this may be a significant moment within the Conservative Party, within the parliamentary party.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously we heard this morning a little bit more sort of leaking out of Boris's quite sort of feisty meeting with the 1922 committee yesterday. I think a lot of those MPs, backbench MPs, not particularly happy about the government's approach to tackling down on the so-called sleaze, obviously second jobs, them not all being sleazy, of course. And it makes sense if you're, a backbench MP who's quite comfortable in that position. They're not, let's say a Red Wall MP who is still sort of really on the campaign, even as they are in their seat, because they want to, ensure that Labour doesn't take that seat back at the next election. You obviously are someone who's in a more secure position, and you might feel comfortable taking directorships or taking consultancy roles. And let's say you're, an MP, middle-aged MP in that sort of position where you're able to take those roles, and you have, 3-4 kids and they all go to private schools, the bill starts to add up, right? So they probably think to themselves, okay, I want to be making a little bit more money on the side. Obviously, the issue is where the conflict of interest can come in to play, as it clearly did, unfortunately, with Owen Paterson. Yeah,
I think Andrew Rossendale was talking about people's lifestyles when it came to earning second jobs and stuff. Georgia, thank you very much indeed. Georgia Gilholy there, joining me on what Boris Johnson's been, I think we can say, a difficult week, not an ideal week for the Prime Minister. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now,